Welcome everybody to Indivisible Texas Ledge Live. It is Saturday, January 16th, 2021. We are here with you this Saturday to do a little recap on what has happened during the first week of the 87th Texas Legislature. Joining is Jason Sugg, our Twitter commander-in-chief. He is keeping track of all those conversations that are happening and really we're going to highlight some of the information that's been shared throughout this week for all of you. And our goal is to probably do this every other Saturday for right now, because there's not going to be too much stuff happening. And Jason, we'll both have to see if we have the capacity to do it any more frequently than that.
Right.
As the news just, some of it's just going to have to wash over us, is because the Texas Ledge craziness will kick in later in February, early March.
Yep.
Well, let's jump in. There's a lot of information that was shared, a lot of decisions made, critical decisions in this first week. Let's take a look at some of the tweets that you've gathered so that we can see what happened and what everybody else can make sure that they are aware of for the Texas Ledge.
Sure, yeah, and I've got my cowboy hat in honor this week because it's been a real yahoo of a week at the Texas Ledge.
Very nice.
Let me find my where'd they go? Boy, sorry, I didn't realize this was going to be so hard to find.
Well, we hope everyone's gotten their coffee or tea or whatever they've had ready. It's Saturday, but as we know, there's no off days in organizing around the state legislature.
Here we go. I got it. Sorry about that hiccup.
No worries.
So just to start us off, I really liked this week one recap from Planned Parenthood Texas Votes. They're great to follow on Twitter, by the way, if you're not already. This just laid it out, I thought. We kicked off on Tuesday. There were armed militia groups there and tents set up at the Capitol for testing people for COVID and whatnot. And members who weren't going to the swearing-in ceremonies because they didn't want to be in this super spreader event. Day two, Dan Patrick changed the Senate rules to shut out the minority party. We're going to say a little bit more about that, but this is every session, whatever happens in the Senate electorally, Dan Patrick adjusts the rules so that Republicans control everything. Day three, we already had an attempt to prioritize unconstitutional abortion bans. And day four, we've already had a House rep who's tested positive after the swearing-in ceremony, and representatives have gone into quarantine because of it.
A pretty packed first week, I'd have to say.
First week, right? Like the action keeps flowing. This week was really, like, as the first week of the Texas Ledge is often about establishing the rules for how it was going to happen in both the Senate and the House. On Thursday, we got new rules and a couple of highlights of these. Lawmakers are required to wear a mask on the floor, but they're not required to have COVID-19 tests for people coming into the chamber, which you would think, given that they already have somebody who's infected, they would want, but oh well. And perhaps more important for the rest of us is that they declined to expand virtual testimony options, which means that if you want to offer testimony to the ledge as a whole, then you're going to have to go down and go in person to this place with these other people in the midst of a pandemic. I haven't heard any word on whether they're requiring their donors to come in person before they hear about them, but we can take a guess about that.
Excellent point, because we know that accommodations made for certain donors or certain influencers of the Texas Ledge are handedly available to those, and it really was disappointing just on those Texas House rules that we saw something a little different with the Texas Senate rules that were passed, which we'll dive into that Dan Patrick decision. But in terms of, they're going to require their members to have a negative test before coming into the chamber. And it just shows, this is another example of just the failure for Texas leadership to have a cohesive, united approach so that everyone can have the same experience and expectation when it comes to the state legislature. And the House's inability to pass that extra protection measure, mask, great, that is definitely something we want to keep as a standard, but let's make sure everyone is negative before they're entering the chamber, so that what's that going to happen for the quarantine aspects of this? There's 150 members in the House. We really could have made that extra step. They could have made that extra step. But then, like you said, the virtual testimony, super disappointing that the virtual testimony was not expanded.
And we should mention that this is coming against the backdrop of a series of weeks where 400 Texans a week are dying of COVID. And we have, as high a infection rate as we've had in this whole thing. So I find it very disappointing that they're not making accommodations for this. Erin Zwiener, who's a House rep from the Hays County area between Austin and San Antonio, had this great series of tweets about the rules that I wanted to highlight a couple of things about. She just went over the fact that the virtual testimony has been limited, which, as she points out, really is that rule really targets the communities that have been hit the hardest by COVID, which tend to be the poorer communities, the ones who have less access in the first place. So it's really it's a really unfortunate thing. This second tweet, I think, is really important, though, that something she highlighted, that there's still options to get virtual testimony into the process here, that every committee chair has the ability to open that up for their own committee hearings. And so this is going to be certainly a focus of ours in terms of our actions, is hitting on these committee chairs to really open this up for people in that part of the process, even if it's not open in the broader Texas House floor process. And as she highlights, feel free to hit up your member of the legislature to also help. We should be making this process available to people, right, Alex?
Yeah. There's a couple of different things that Erin Zwiener highlights here, which is really important that we always try to share with everyone. The uniqueness of the state legislature allows us to really contact committee chairs and committee members, even if it's not your legislature that's represents your district. We are going to need every Texan to contribute and contacting these committee members so that virtual testimony is available for these committee hearings. And every Texan can be a part of that process, can be a part of contacting them and notifying them, even if it's not your district representative, because we are going to champion for virtual testimony in each of these committees. And so that's going to be one thing you're going to be hearing from us to take action on, so that we continue to bring that conversation, to bring that opportunity up for people to get virtual testimony. And the other thing we hear from people is that, wow, if you provide virtual testimony, you could have 27-hour hearings or 40-hour hearings and things like that. And it's like, yes, Texas has over 29 million people.
Yeah.
We should be making it possible for every Texan to be able to provide their perspective and to be able to contribute to what laws are being considered. And the only reason we think this is a strain is because our legislature still decides to only meet for 140 days every 2 years. This would not feel so compact, and our time would not feel so precious if we had a legislative session that was much more expanded in terms of time and availability before bills get pushed through, get voted on by legislators, and then signed by the governor. There should be much more of a space and opportunity for Texans to be able to provide their voice on laws and to be able to give their perspective to inform our legislators.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. I don't think we talk about this enough, how much the legislative structure in Texas is set up in such a way that it makes it hard for the most affected people and the people with the least resources to make their voices heard. I mean, there are historical reasons that it's this way, but whatever the reasons in the past, that's the effect now. And we need a legislative system that's really going to be taking into account the voices of all Texans. And boy, we do not have that now.
Unfortunately, the pandemic did not give us the progress that we were all hoping for initially. Still more opportunity, though.
That's right. That's right. We mentioned this a little earlier, but we see this every legislative session with Dan Patrick, that he sets up the rules so that the Republicans control the entire agenda of the legislature, or the Texas Senate, that whatever the number of Republicans in that Senate is what becomes required to bring legislation to the floor, which means that Democrats have no opportunity to be able to bring legislation to the floor in this process or object to it either. Like if the Republican caucus agrees on something, then it's going to come to the floor, and Democrats have no say in it. And this is being kind of snidely referred to as the 5/9 rule, which is, I mean, totally arbitrary, right?
And these are the adjustments. It was the 2/3 rule, and then it was the 3/5 rule, and now we're at the 5/9 rule.
Yeah.
It's absurd because this is what helps contribute to the divisiveness in our legislature
and the extremism that we see come out of the Texas legislature.
Exactly. If we had the opportunity to where Republicans and Democrats were able to work together, would they disagree on major things? Yes. Would they have to talk these things out and come to a compromise? Would each side of the political aisle be frustrated because they didn't get everything they wanted? Most likely. But in all honesty, as Texans, we want our legislators talking to each other and coming to solutions so that all Texans are considered in these bills that get passed. And the way Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick continues to alter the rules for the Senate, as you said, keeps it to where the Republican agenda is on the forefront, and the Senate's going to be led exclusively by the Republican agenda, and really tampers on the voice of the minority party, which in this case is the Democratic Party.
Right. I mean, another way we could be saying this is that the Texas legislature would have to act like adults and understand the points of view of other people.
Oh, yes. That is an excellent way of phrasing that. Let's act like adults.
Next up, this is big news actually for Texas. We have a new Speaker of the House, Dade Phelan from the Beaumont area, I believe. And he was, we kind of knew this was going to happen, right? This process, there's lots of lining up of votes and whatnot in the months between the election and the swearing in. But it happened this week. He was actually elected and sworn in as Speaker. And we see I like this article because you really see the way this process works in Texas. Like, I mean, this guy was just another legislator from Beaumont before the election. Since then, since he lined up the votes to be Speaker, he's had a flood of cash from donors come in. And again, you have to wonder if the access of these people will be restricted by COVID or not. Somehow we doubt it.
Yeah, and I think this is huge. This article is really great to kind of show the kind of power that coalesce around the Speaker of the House, because this is why the House is so important, and why we were advocating for flipping the House so that the Speaker of the House would most likely end up being a Democrat, because we see on the Senate House of things, Dan Patrick's going to change the rules, and he's going to make sure the Republican agenda is priority. And we see some of the most harmful legislation coming out of the Senate. And if we don't have the right Speaker of the House to balance that, so that harmful legislation doesn't not only pass the Senate, but could potentially pass the House, then that's how harmful legislation becomes law and the governor signs it. And so Dade Phelan, what's interesting about his selection is that it did have bipartisan support. Nicole Collier, a Democrat, was, I think, the second person to speak on his nomination. And she gave a speech supporting him as Speaker of the House and talked about his attributes and character and everything. And so the hope, we've seen other Republican House speakers like Joe Strauss, who really helped protect some of the worst things that certain Texas legislators wanted to pass get stopped at the House. And the hope is that Dade Phelan is going to be that balanced leader that helps ensure that solutions for all Texans are being pursued, and that we're not taking this overly ideological slant on legislation that's being pursued and passed that unfortunately, ends up harming too many communities in Texas, especially our Black and Brown communities. And so Dade Phelan, getting that power coalesced around him with fundraising capacity and capabilities will be interesting. And with his selection and the vote for him as Speaker of the House, it means that Dade Phelan very well may be a lasting figure in our state legislature and state leadership. And so it'll be interesting to follow him this legislative session and see what kind of leader he's trying to be for Texas.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point, that he is a lot more moderate than a lot of the other Republicans in the caucus. And you see this fairly consistently in the House, right? And it's part of the difference in how the House and the Senate are set up. Dan Patrick's statewide elected official. And so the Republican tilt of the state tends to put him in charge of things, and he kind of rules with an iron fist there. Here we see a process where there's more input from more people. And so it gets a lot more moderated in the House than in the Senate, thankfully. Yeah. Next up, also an important role, the President Pro Tem of the Senate. We had Senator Birdwell elected, who, again, this is the Senate, so things tend to be a little more extreme. Senator Birdwell invoked Allen West in his acceptance speech or whatnot, who's the kind of radical chair of the Texas GOP right now. But this is significant because he's kind of third in line after Abbott and Patrick. It's the Senate Pro Tem of the Senate. So he's a significant figure out there, even if he'll probably largely operate in the background of these other people.
Yeah, and I think there is a kind of ceremonial governor of the day that he'll have. I don't have the details with me today, but there is something that he'll have that little ceremonial opportunity through the session. But yeah, if the governor and lieutenant governor are no longer available, something happens or whatever, then Senator Birdwell becomes a very important figure in Texas.
Absolutely. Also, I want to highlight this Twitter account, Quorum Report. If you want to follow the ins and outs of the Texas legislature, this is a great account. It's just purely devoted to Texas Lege, and they really track all the procedural stuff and whatnot, and so it's really a helpful thing to have. And our last tweet of the week here, all of this is, of course, is taking place against the backdrop of this national, I don't know what you call it. I want to call it something, but I can't because of broadcast. That, of course, all the stuff at the national level, Texas has been playing a really critical role in as well. Some of our elected officials, including Ken Paxton, our indicted attorney general, and Abbott and Dan Patrick to lesser degrees, but certainly there, and lots of Texas reps and senators, and obviously Ted Cruz, but also at the Texas Lege level, lots of people have been involved in this. And there's been threats of violence around the inauguration next week, and it's serious enough here that DPS is closing down the Capitol starting today through Wednesday to protect against it. So we're seeing that extremism out there that's in our national culture now and in our Texas culture. And it's gotta be, I'm certainly alarmed, but I would imagine lots of people are. And it's one of the reasons that, man, we really need people to get involved in this organization, Indivisible Texas Lege, so that we can start to be moderating this and taking our state back from these nuts who can't behave like adults,
Yeah, it's definitely troublesome. We're going to transition to our January 6th actions that we've been, posting about over the last week, or, since January 8th, since we released a statement with several Texas organizations. But Jason, you're exactly right. The Capitol was closed on January 6th because of what happened at the Capitol and what was happening at several state houses. And so Texas wisely chose to close the Capitol because of risks of violence. And to see that they're going to be closed from Saturday through Wednesday of this week and next week is going to show that these threats are becoming more and more credible in the eyes of our leaders, in the eyes of our state, and we really need everybody to contribute to stopping this kind of behavior and rhetoric from being normalized. We cannot stand as a democracy, as a state, as a country, for this to become commonplace and for people to feel entitled to terrorize and put our institutions and our elected officials and our processes at stake. We have these processes in place as a democracy. We have elections, we have legislative sessions, both in our state and nationally. Our cities have city council, school boards have school board districts, and we're going to disagree on maybe direction and disagree on how things are going, but we have a process to engage. We have a process to take a role in those spaces. And the last thing we want to see normalized is violence against this process and violence against elected officials, and seeing any elected official encouraging or inciting violence to be taken place. And so this is just another reminder around the world we're living in right now, and that there are key actions that we need every Texan to take. And so I want to highlight a couple of comments before I transition to our January 6th. We have the amazing Lydia Ozuna, who's a part of Texans Against Gerrymandering, watching us live. So Lydia, shout out to you and your amazing organization, TAG. And she wanted to share, Senator Birdwell is also on the Senate Redistricting Committee, which is a very important committee this year because of the census that took place and redistricting that's going to happen. And so his influence in that space is going to be huge. And then, yes, we totally agree. The threats, in addition to the pandemic, reinforces the need for virtual two-way testimony. We couldn't agree more. And so advocating for that for each of these committees at this point. And we can also advocate to our legislators to decide to allow virtual testimony across the board. We can change those decisions. We can
right.
we have the power to be able to do that. And so we're going to encourage Texans to continue to engage on that and to continue to voice the desire and need for this virtual testimony. And so let's jump into the January 6th project. We're also going to highlight some of the committee assignments that have been made later in the week. That's a whole other conversation we feel like we want to dedicate with, other resources we have within our organizing team. And so be on the lookout for us this upcoming week to talk about the committee assignments, and we'll be talking to some partners around that as well. But I'm going to share our action around January 6th to make sure everybody is aware of the action that we are a part of and promoting for Texans and Texas organizations to be a part of. And so let me share my screen really quick here. Okay, on our homepage, we have our link to our statement at the very top that we want people to be able to find easily and to be able to click on and link. And this is our statement alongside right now 73 other Texas organizations that have signed on to this statement. And we are calling for the resignation of Senator Ted Cruz, Attorney General Ken Paxton, and the 16 members of Congress that voted to object to the 2020 election results. We believe the actions of these Texas elected officials leading up to January 6th and on January 6th contributed to the destruction and the violence that happened at the U.S. Capitol and continues to put us in a state of risk and threats, where the Texas Capitol has now closed twice within the last 2 weeks. And so if you are part of a Texas organization, you can advocate for your organization to join this letter, and you can email us at indivisibletxledge@gmail.com. We'll put that in the comments so you have that there as well. We're also supporting the resolution of Representative Cori Bush to expel the seditious members of Congress that attempted to undermine the legitimacy of our democratic election results. And while Donald Trump is still in office as president, we are calling for the immediate invocation of the 25th Amendment to remove him, or impeachment proceedings to be done and completed for Donald Trump. And here's the list of organizations that have signed on. There's links to their websites if we have those links, or if they have a website. And then here's their logos that represent all of the people that have signed on. Now, you as an individual Texan can also sign this letter, and we are sending this information to elected officials. Within our page, there's a sign here link. And so far, 757 Texans have signed on to this letter, and it's the same letter we have with the Texas organizations. And you are simply adding your voice to ask for the resignation of these 18 Texas elected officials who have put their own personal desire for power, their own party's power over our country's democracy. And we don't believe that they should be representing anybody in our country, let alone Texans, because they are abusing their power and they're abusing their role, and in our eyes have proven they're entirely unfit for office. So we want to encourage everyone to not only sign, but to share as many Texans as you can, so they can be a part of that. And then lastly, we have calls to action that we kicked off on January 11th, last Monday. We're asking people to continue to take action around these. And we have 8 different actions that you can take. And these actions and these steps will help continue that pressure, so that these elected officials feel that pressure from their constituents and from Texans to resign from their position. But we are also have some steps to where accountability can be done by the other members of these different levels of government. So if it's your Congress member who's not one of these 16 Congress members that voted against it, you can contact them and ask them to publicly call for resignation, or for them to be able to support expulsion or impeachment. And then for the state legislature, you can contact your state representative, your state senator, and ask them to support Representative Chris Turner's call for the Texas legislature to investigate Attorney General Ken Paxton. Representative Chris Turner out of Arlington and Grand Prairie has really led the way with his statement, and letting Texans know that the legislature has the power not only to investigate Attorney General Ken Paxton, but to hold him accountable in several ways, including in impeachment. And so we want to encourage Texans to reach out to their Texas legislators to support Representative Chris Turner's statement and call for investigation and impeachment of Attorney General Ken Paxton.
It was bad enough when he was just indicted Attorney General Ken Paxton. Now he's indicted an insurrectionist Attorney General Ken Paxton. Let's get him out of there.
And that's an excellent point you make, Jason. I mean, this is he is now openly showing his corruption and his desire to do what serves him and the people that he feels are the influential people he should care about. And he is not doing the things to help all Texans as an attorney general and the role and the capacity that he could be doing that work in. And so removing him from office through impeachment by the legislature feels like honestly the minimum that we should be doing, because he is openly being corrupt in front of all of us now.
Yep.
Well, that is the news for this first week of this Texas legislature. Both the House and the Senate will be away from the Capitol until January 26th. And so that'll be the next time a lot of action and activity is going to be happening. Until that, there's a lot of action you can take: contacting your legislator, contributing to the call for resignation for the January 6th action, but also contacting your legislator and contacting committee members around virtual testimony. We want to continue to push for virtual testimony for the legislative session. And so keep doing what you're doing, Texas. Let's work together so that we can have a legislative session that supports and passes bills to improve the lives of all Texans in all the various ways it truly can make a positive impact.
Amen.
All right. Well, Jason, we'll be at it again, and we got to see that cowboy hat next time.
All right.
All right. Y'all take it easy. Enjoy y'all's weekend.